Internal family systems is a theory and a method that was created for therapy, actually, by family therapist Richard Schwartz, Dick Schwartz. And the idea behind it is that our internal lives are like our sort of external lives are part of it's a system, right? It's a system internally that has many voices, many parts. And oftentimes we don't even know that we're talking in IFS language, but think about the last time you said either to your spouse or to your family, like a part of me really wants to do this, and another part of me feels like staying home, right? That is like quintessential
Mm.
parts language, right? And in the coaching, we acknowledge that there are a multiplicity of parts within us. And some of the parts are actually sometimes legacy parts, right? Like they come from our ancestors. Um, and this idea that when a part is wounded, right, protector parts come up to protect you. I got certified in IFS coaching. And because, again, you have to coach so much when you're doing these classes, I found it completely transformational to be in conversation with my own young parts, right? Realize to
Mm.
have memory that I hadn't had about myself, about my father, about things that were getting in the way come up was just transformational. And there's a lot more to it, but it's this idea that as a practitioner, let's say you and I were working together, we would be giving voice to your parts. And some of the
Yeah.
parts would be young parts, some of them would be ancestral parts, some of them would be the part of you that has made you successful, but maybe gets in the way of having fun when it's time to have. Right. So,
Yeah.
but to me, this like beautiful acknowledgement that we are made up of a multiplicity of parts and all the parts are good, right? Sometimes we need to unburden the parts, right? But I just feel like for me, it's been an incredible pathway to work with my clients, but also for myself. I value it as a method. And I'm currently in a class again to get deeper into the method. I think I shared this with you when we were prepping for this that Dick Schwartz was a white man and my teacher is a
Yeah.
white man. And in the classes, this is, I think, the fifth class I take. There is always like one or two people of color, me being one of them. And I really want to dig into this theory because I think it can be transformational for us. I'm interested in how do we use this for our legacy burdens, right? How do we find freedom
Mhm.
through this method? And I don't know, props to Dick Schwartz and my teacher, because they do talk about the impact of race and racism, but not in the way I think we have to talk about it to use this method to help us get free.
Mhm. There's just certain experiences that enable us to talk a little bit more deeply about these
That's
things with one another. And so I was really inspired and happy to learn that you're incorporating that into your work and your practice. And in another sense, it sounds like similarly earlier on in your story, it's, hey, who else out here like you is out here doing this coaching work? And then similarly in your classes too, sort of notes of encouragement or calling in would you share to other coaches of or potential folks of color out there who are learning about coaching through our conversation here or who have been contemplating a little bit? Are there any invitational words or thoughts that you might share with those folks who are deciding about this or just
Yeah.
learning about this
I
just
mean,
now?
I think if people are wondering, they should get a coach. I think
Yeah.
being in positions of leadership or wanting to be in a position of leadership, it helps to have support. right? Find yourself someone that you vibe with. I do a vibe check always. I tell people, like, you should interview multiple people and let's do a vibe check. Or after talking with me, do you feel like you want to have an intimate relationship with me? Because that's what coaching is, right? There's a level of intimacy. And also ask myself that question, do I feel like I want to have an intimate relationship with this person? So it's like a two-way conversation. And sometimes people come to me and they feel so shy to let me know, like, I'm talking to someone else tomorrow. I'm like, you should. So I think that would be the first thing I would say is let yourself get the support that you deserve by getting a coach, someone again that you feel like I want to be in relationship with this person. And then I think there are lots of programs out there. Many of them are not social justice oriented, right? Uh, now there's a
Mhm.
few that are include like some lessons and some language around it, and there are some that do. One thing I would say, share with folks, you want to make sure that you can get certified that wherever you go, because it costs money, is International Federation of Coaching certified. So you can get your certification and get recognized. The field is becoming more and more professionalized. Um, and then I would say coaching is not about giving advice necessarily. And so that would be something that I would be on the lookout for. Like, it's really you as the client should set the a question I always ask is what's on your mind? What needs to be spoken today? Uh, what do you need to put voice to? Like that is the space that I like to create. There are some coaches that do like very modular, like first you do this and then you do that and then you do that. That might work really great for some folks. And so that's why you date, right? That's why you go on these vibe checks. For me, that's
Mhm.
the way that I approach the work.
Mhm.
But I think for some people that might really work. And so really thinking about if I were a coach, how would I want to lead and hold space for people? But also, what do I need in this moment? Right. When you're looking for
Mhm.
supporters.
Now, can you say those 2 questions that you asked one more time? It was like, "What
Oh,
needs to be
yeah,
spoken
yeah.
today?" What did you say when you asked?
What needs to be spoken today would be, let's say you and I were coaching and we were heading into a session after we said, "Hi, how you doing?" Talk about how hot it is in New York today. I would probably ask
Right.
you, what needs to be spoken today? Or is there something that needs to be given space? Is there a part of you that
Mm.
needs to have the stage? Uh, and oftentimes
Mhm.
that gives you the opportunity to look inside and say, yeah, this is what I think is front and center for me.
Yeah. 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 As you were asking those questions, I was also thinking about, in particular, you share you work primarily with clients of color, mostly women of color as well. Having that intentional space to be asked, what is it that needs to be shared today? Having that support and being provided that space to share uninterrupted, no judgment. I'm just thinking like how transformational that is for so many people, given their experiences in organizations or marginalized identities, all of the, again, going back to what you talked about, the individualized society, we're supposed to control everything and what happens when you're not, all of the ways in which just navigating those organizational dynamics that are sometimes even at odds with what they would, your clients would choose and do themselves. And so all the types of armor, all of the racial, gendered calculus that happens to interpret different situations and try to make the best kind of decision, like having the space with someone and how you're supporting your clients and just, okay, hey, what is it that is on your mind, that's on your heart today to share? Having that opportunity for folks to really be with themselves in a way that's uninterrupted. Not, this is all about your thoughts and so I liked how you said it's not really about giving advice. It's creating this opportunity and co-creating a space where the person feels as if they can truly, like, all right, sometimes even have conversations with themselves out loud to come to some conclusion perhaps that they might not have gotten on their own, because outside of those intentional spaces there's all these other things coming at them. So I'm just thinking about just the significance of the spaces that you provide, and you say, oh, this is doula work. Like, I very much believe in that and just the transformational power that exists in that work and in the ways that
I
you
mean,
do it.
I'll
So
just say to that, there's incredible power in being witness. And that part of the job, both when you're coaching teams and organizations and individuals, is, what are the questions that need to be asked, right? Like advice giving. Every now and then, I will tell one of my clients, "Do you want to know what I think?" right? uh, about this or
yeah,
that or whatever. Or they will say, I really want to know what you think. But for the most part, the coach's role is about witnessing people, right? It's about, to your point, like, how do you create the space for people to come and say, um, gosh, I'm so embarrassed, or this happened. I really hate that I did this. And then my role is to say, how did the embarrassment show up for you? And can I witness and can I be with that to really see that? I think that's very different than saying to someone, next time you get embarrassed or next time this happens, maybe you should do these three things, right? It's a
it
very
is.
different
It is.
tone. And
Yeah.
perhaps together we can come up with, in an ideal world, what would you have done? And do you need some tools, right? For the next time this happens, because your boss is going to want blah, 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 whatever. So I think for me, there are lots of people out there that do they'll show you how to be successful at your job. And that's not what I want to do this work for. I want to do this work to witness people, to give them space, and to know that together we can come up with some tools for sure. And I have
Hmm.
tools that I use and things
Hmm.
that we work with, but that's a really different approach. And there's some people that do that other kind of coaching really great. And sometimes I'll tell I'm not the one for that,
Hmm.
but here's some recommendations. Here's some colleagues I work with, because I do feel that we have so few spaces where we are actually seen and witnessed.
Yes.
And can I create that for the people that I work with?
And when I think about connecting it to our own different unlearning journeys, unpacking internalized depression too, I'm seeing some connections between the work of a mutual friend of ours. I was talking with Amber Banks earlier, and a lot of her work and things that she's focused on now is the relationship between power and privilege and oppression and how that influences trust, particularly how our experiences with oppression impact our abilities to have a trusting relationship with ourselves. And as you talk about creating spaces and being with people so they can be witnessed, and how over time that witnessing can have a transformative effect in that it's centered around their perspectives. What do you think? What's on your heart? What's on your mind? How did you feel about this situation? And the more you're in relationship with talking and hearing from yourself in ways that we don't necessarily get to hear from ourselves with all the outside noise, I think that has a way of supporting folks and building that more trusting relationship with themselves so that when those things creep in, you've had some experiences. Wait a minute, here's what I can control. Here's a system thing that goes far beyond how I might be feeling about myself individually right now. There's some systemic stuff going on. And then there are also some parts that I can control. But the staying in conversation as I'm listening to you and how you share about your practice and the ways you relate to your clients, I'm just seeing some connections and how that sustained relationship over time can help folks who are experiencing that oppression to be able to listen to themselves a bit more amidst all the messages we get that we're taught to distrust ourselves, our instincts, our knowing from an ancestral place. And so it's just so incredible, that practice of being with people and witnessing them in that way. And I'm also hoping as folks are listening, you're able to recognize and see yourself situated in these conversations that we're
Um,
having.
can I say just
So
two things? Systems of oppression, right? Whether they be capitalism, racism, patriarchy, whatever, inherently are created for those that don't have power to distrust themselves, right? And sometimes each other. Right. It in our political conversations right now, right? The way groups are pitted up against each other, but just individually, right? Like something as simple as, do I belong here? which is not simple. The question is simple, but the impact is not. And so that I think is part of the importance, right? It is important to create places where we can be witnessed because the systems that we're a part of are created, and the more your identities intersect, I am a woman, I am of color, I am queer, I am, the more that the body and our minds learn to distrust. And so, how do we create the
Hmm.
spaces for people to reimagine what's possible, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's one. I think the other thing, just very quickly back to ISS, one of the things that method can teach you is, for example, when the voice of imposter syndrome shows up, is to say, the part of me that feels like an imposter is here. Is what does it need from me right now? And that's very different than I am an imposter and I feel like an imposter. It is, oh, wait a minute. There's a part of me that feels like an imposter in this moment, in this situation, in this place, in this whatever. Is there something that I need? Is there something that it needs to soften,
Hmm.
to loosen the grip? And that is transformation. The moment that you can do that,
Yeah.
that changes your relationship to yourself and to that part, right? Because it's a part. And it needs, I don't know, maybe it needs some support. Maybe it needs silence. Maybe it needs some breathing. Maybe it needs, I don't know, maybe it needs some yoga. Right? That's very
Mm.
then I do not belong. It's a part of me feels like I do not belong. And there are some tools that I have to help that part feel less salient, less triggered at the moment, less whatever. And so I just wanted to say that because it feels, especially for those of us that look like me and you, again, the system has told us we don't belong. How do the work in safe spaces to reimagine the relationship to belonging, to leadership, to fill in the
That is transformational as you described that. And I remember you talked about parts work and recognizing that all the parts are good too. So it's also very different to say, oh, the part of me that feels like an imposter is here. What does it need from me in this moment? It's different to say that as you shared than it is, I am an imposter and there's something wrong. The shame associated
right.
with that, it's a noticing of this part that is a part of my collective is here in this moment. And what does it need from me? And so even in that framing, I think is also transformational in shifting that internalized, there is something wrong with me to acknowledging like, these are all parts of me. All these parts are good. What is it that they need? Just really appreciating you breaking that down and explaining that to folks who are listening. And hey, and to me too, of course.